I can't believe I've reached 75. I never imagined I would live this long. I've made my share of mistakes, but for the most part I've been blessed with a good life. Lately I've been thinking about the things I've done, both good and bad, and how they may have made a difference in other people's lives. I want to tell you a story that reflects a George Bailey moment. George Bailey, the character in It's a Wonderful Life, is shown that his life matters. He's given a glimpse of what the world would have been like if he had never lived, and in that revelation he discovers the true impact of his existence. My story began 30 years ago. I was living a life of recovery. I had been divorced for about 2 years and was still living in mourning. I dated but never got too involved with anyone. I had a job with a utility company that showed security and paid well. My problem was that I was still paying off credit card debt from the marriage. I had a garden apartment with very little furniture. In other words, I was pretty broke. Despite being pretty broke, I became resourceful, discovering plenty of inexpensive ways to have fun. The start of summer found me browsing a department store where I discovered a beautiful, reasonably priced boat. At only $35, I bought it immediately, knowing it would be a source of great fun. Just a short distance from my apartment sat a quiet little lake that became my summer sanctuary. Every weekend I'd gather a few friends and we'd make a full day of it, hopping between the swimming area and the picnic tables. My favorite ritual, however, was rowing my boat out to the very center of the water. I'd lie back and simply drift under the warm sun. To me, that was absolute heaven. I was grabbing a drink with my best friend Jim one day. Jim and I have been inseparable since the 7th grade, so I've been there for it all, including his early marriage to our classmate Sue. Like many who marry young, they face their share of growing pains. But through hard work and counseling, they built something truly beautiful. I've grown to love their 3 children as my own. They call me Uncle Richard, which makes me feel like a true extension of their family. While we were catching up and swapping stories, Jim mentioned they were heading to the shore for a few days. On an impulse, even though I'm usually quite protective of my private possessions, I suggested they take my boat. Jim was incredibly enthusiastic and swung by to pick it up the very next morning. About a week later, I received a call from Jim's wife, Sue. She wanted to thank me for lending my boat to them. Seeing the kids out on the water heading toward the surf was a joy, Sue said. They were a bit tentative at first, clutching the sides of the boat with wide eyes, but it didn't take long for their nerves to vanish. Before long, they were laughing and finding their rhythm with the waves. "Again, Richard, thank you," she said. I just smiled and told her, "You're more than welcome." As the weeks slipped by, an invitation arrived from Jim and Sue for their 10th anniversary. The timing was disastrous. A series of expensive car repairs had just drained my bank account, leaving me completely tapped out. Having served as an usher at their wedding, I felt a deep need to give them a gift that reflected how much their friendship meant to me. I just didn't know how I'd afford it. I finally found the answer. At the party, I handed them a card with a short note inside. "Keep the boat." They were ecstatic. It wasn't the gift I'd originally planned, but seeing their reaction, I knew it was the right one. That should have been the closing chapter. My boat was safe, but letting go was incredibly difficult. I eventually moved on, or at least I thought I did. What I didn't know at the time was that the story was actually just beginning. A few months later, Jim and I were catching up over breakfast. We spent the morning drifting between old memories and our plans for the future until suddenly Jim paused. "You know, Rich, I keep forgetting to tell you something," he said. "Your boat? It saved 2 people's lives." I stared at him stunned. "What are you talking about?" We took the kids to Lake Tomahawk for a long weekend last September. There was a bench perched right on the shoreline where I loved to sit, quiet and still, just taking in the beauty of the water. At one point, I watched my neighbor Bill and his son preparing to set sail. I noticed they weren't wearing life jackets, but I decided to keep the thought to myself. As they headed out, it became clear from the way Bill handled the boat that he was far from an expert. I went in the house to get a beer. When I came out, I looked at the lake and knew something was wrong. There was an obstruction about a half a mile away in the lake. I went back into the house and got my binoculars. God help me, it was a nightmare. My neighbor's boat was dead in the water, completely capsized. I scanned the waves, but there was no sign of him or his son. A mile of open water lay between that wreck and the shore, a distance I knew they'd never even attempt to swim. I didn't know what to do. There were no other boats on the lake, and it might be too late to get emergency services. I felt helpless. I looked to the lawn and saw it, the inflatable you gave us. I didn't think, I just moved. I threw it into the surf and paddled like hell toward the sailboat. I don't think I've ever moved that fast in my life. I finally pulled alongside. My neighbor and his boy were white-knuckled, clinging to the slick hull for dear life. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed them. Once they were in the inflatable, we turned back. We dug into the water with everything we had left until our boat hit the safety of the shore. I sat there in silence, stunned by everything Jim had just told me. When I finally found my voice, I could only whisper, "My God, Jim, you're a hero." He looked at me, his eyes heavy with everything we'd been through, and said, "Rich, we're both heroes." It goes without saying that day changed everything. It was my wake-up call. These days, I make sure my gifts come from the heart, truly from the heart. And if I feel myself getting possessive or holding back, I tell those thoughts to get lost. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for stopping by. We'll talk again soon.